font for comfortable editing, and how to use WYSIWYG display. Court reporters in the United States typically bill by the page and print their transcripts using fonts that emulate old typewriters. Well, you can print with a monospaced font while editing using a proportional font. Settings, Display, Editing font. Times New Roman is usually available. Now let's zoom in to take advantage of the display space. Much easier to read. When I'm working with parts of my transcript that are aligned in columns, I like to view the text exactly as it will be printed using monospaced fonts. So I've set up a speed key, Shift-Control F12, that opens a menu of choices, the first of which is WYSIWYG Preview. And when I want to switch back to my default display, the second choice returns to my default display using proportional editing fonts. So this is one speed key worth remembering.
Got it? So the WYSIWYG is what you see is what you get. So if you want to see what it's going to look like, you can go into that and it'll show you. Okay? Did y'all get that?
WYSIWYG?
WYSIWYG. No?
Yeah.
Tired or what?
It feels like it's 10 o'clock.
Feels like it's midnight. So you see what it did? So Control Shift F12 will do it. Thank y'all for writing that down. Brings up the display. Okay? So guys, look at this zoom. You can zoom in as much as you want. Okay, you can do 100.
Control Shift what?
12. F12. Control Shift F12. I don't need to write that down. I'll remember that. Mm-hmm.
That's cute.
So you see what it does? Look at it. So you can go to 150, full page, 100. You can change your editing fonts to whatever.
Oh, yeah.
You can make them bigger. So you can do all kinds of stuff in there. That background, let's see what it does. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
No.
So, yeah. But that's how you do it, if you want to do it. We're not gonna.
The Window menu contains options to help you organize multiple open documents. Cascade fans out your windows like a deck of cards. Tile gives each window an equal share of the display space. You could then resize your windows by hovering over an edge or a corner and holding down the left mouse button while you drag the window. To move the window, hover over its title bar, left-click, hold down, and drag. You can also open more than one window on the same document. Each new window can have its own display properties, and each is an independent access point to let you edit your document.
I don't know why you would do that, but I mean, if you want to, help yourself.
You can also split your text window into two panes. Move your mouse till it hovers over the splitter bar. Hold down the left mouse button and drag. Each pane can have its own look, and each pane lets you edit your document from top to bottom. To switch from one pane to the other, you can either use the keyboard command, Shift-Control-Tab, or just use the mouse to point and click. If you want to remove a split, hover over it with the mouse, hold down the left mouse button, and drag the split to the edge of the screen. Finally, let's look at the Split Window option in the Real-Time section of User Settings. If you change this number to something other than 0, you're asking Eclipse to automatically split your real-time window into an editing pane and a follow-along pane. Let's see. The top pane is what I or my real-time scopist use for editing. Here the cursor stays where I leave it. The bottom pane follows along as I write.
Once again, help yourself.
Let's see how to use the Total Eclipse Document Setup Wizard. Settings, Document Setup Wizard. The wizard walks you through a set of basic questions. It uses your answers to adjust your user's settings. As you move from one question to the next, a preview window shows you exactly how your document will look when it's printed. If you don't like the change that you see in the preview, you can always use the back button to go back and correct an answer. Keep in mind that the preview shows you the changes to your user settings, so what you see on your screen may not exactly match the example that I'm showing here. I'll start at the beginning of the wizard, but you can also use the wizard to fine-tune an existing format. Next, let's adjust the number of characters per inch. Watch the preview as I change the 10 to a 9. I can just type the number, or click on the spin controls of the dialog. Next, page size. It's correct, so I'll go to the next screen. Here I'll adjust the top margin. This time I'll use the fine adjustment. Next, I'll adjust the bottom margin. You can see how the preview is very helpful here. Next, the left margin, not counting the line number or timestamp. I'll move this over just a little bit. Next, page numbers and line numbers. The default is correct for me. I'll go to the next screen. I'd like to move the page number down a little bit. Next, I'll move it a bit to the right. Next, the number of lines per page. The answer is correct. I'll go on. Here I'll adjust the amount of space between the line number and the transcript text. I'll make this space just a little bit bigger. Next, I'll skip the adjustments for headers and text box. I'll go to paragraph setup. Next, we could adjust speakers and bylines and parentheticals, but the process is very much the same. Let's say we're finished. Next, I'll press the Done button. I've been previewing changes, but they're not yet effective until I say, yes, make these settings permanent.
See, so like it's not something that I've really used, but it's something that we could have gone through, like in setting up any of that stuff that we used. You know, so you can kind of go through there. And what's really cool is like you're in the document itself. So you can see what you want to set it up to. You go, you know, you arrow up, arrow down, and it'll move it up, move it bigger, smaller, page to the right, you know, the page number to the right, up, down. You can mess with all of that stuff. Once again, be a little careful because when, not if, when you get out, there's a uniform format rule. So you have to use certain things. So you can't make it, you know, where there's 3 words, the page is this big and there's 3 words and it's, you know, takes up that much of the page. No. You know, there's a certain font, there's a certain character size that you have to use, so you have to be careful with that, okay? Not boring you? Yeah.
It's not about like that, but are we finishing this lesson tonight?
I'm sorry?
Are we finishing this lesson tonight?
We're gonna be pretty close.
Okay.
'Cause we're gonna get into speakers next week. So we're gonna be pretty close. And then we're gonna start doing dictation where, because really what I want y'all to do is I want to finish this up pretty quick. That's why I said we may stay a little bit later, you know, the next, from here on out. Because the finals going to take you a little while. It's not going to be a 3-minute final and you're out of here. It's going to take probably a couple of hours. You know, 1, by the time we read it, 2, by the time you're going through it, and you'll see. I mean, once we start getting into it, you'll see what. So I'm gonna show you how to put your certificate pages in there, your title pages, how to fill them in. So it's gonna start getting pretty detailed now, and I want to be able to spend as much time on that as we can, so that you know, if we have problems, we work those problems out. Okay. Luckily, we haven't had any problems, so we should be good. Why were you asking? Just to make conversation, just to stay awake. Huh?
I counted how many videos there were.
How many are there?
7 more or 8 more
8 more videos on
this lesson.
this lesson? Holy cow!
Yeah.
We're gonna go through them quick because
Yeah.
1, I mean, a lot of this stuff we don't really need to know. So
The Total Eclipse document setup wizard and the ruler are 2 easy methods of adjusting your paragraphs. Here I'll place my cursor in this question and move the mouse to the right margin indicator, left click and drag to the left. When I release the mouse, you'll see the change take
Okay.
effect immediately. Now let's look at some tab stop indicators. These columns were created not by spacing over, but by using tab stops. I'll use the mouse to point to this tab stop, left click, and drag to the right. You see how the text moved over. If you want to remove a tab stop, use the mouse to point to it. Left click, hold down, and drag it off the ruler. If you want to insert a tab, just point to the spot on the ruler, left click. Your tab is inserted. Of course, the changes you make on the ruler are reflected in your user settings. So I could use the advanced button to see the tab stops for this fixed paragraph.
got it? We messed with that a little bit, so. This is kind of important right here.
Let's see how user settings for the current document can be changed without affecting your master format. If you look at the paragraphs or document portion of your user settings when you do not have a document open, what you are seeing is the master format. These are the settings that Eclipse will use when it creates a new document. Once you open your new document, going to the paragraphs, Our document section of your user settings will show you the current document settings, not the master format. In other words, the master format is used to create new documents. But once a document is created, it remembers its own settings. This means that you can confidently reprint an old job, but it also means you can modify your current document settings and test the results before copying these settings so that they will be the master format for future documents. Your paragraph settings are separate from your document settings, and of course you can copy the current document settings to make them the master format, or copy the master format settings to the current document. So if you make format changes in a document that are not being applied to your new documents, it's because you forgot to copy those document changes for the master format.
Got that? So like when we were doing stuff in, you know, those jobs, kind of changing some of the stuff, it just does it in that job, okay? So when you go into your user settings and you're messing with, you know, right margin, left margin, stuff like that, it's only doing it in that job. So if you don't copy it from current job to master, it's not going to do it. Be very careful when you copy that stuff, because once it's in the master, now it's in there, okay? So make sure that it's what you want to do.
Let's see how to change paragraph labels. For instance, I'd like my questions to be labeled with Q period instead of just Q. Settings, paragraphs, questions. I want the advanced information. The default label for all my question paragraphs is currently Q. I'd like to change that from Q to Q period. By the way, do not change this first slot. Leave it blank, because fixed paragraphs, centered paragraphs, and other paragraphs that do not use a label like Q or A are actually using this blank-looking slot. You can see that change is already effective. And I'd make a similar change for my answer paragraphs. But I'd like these changes to affect more than just the current document. So I would make these changes in my master format so that they would affect all future documents that I create.
See, that's when you would do it, if that's what you want to do, okay? And you can change any of that stuff, fixed lines, centered. I wouldn't mess with that stuff a whole lot. So really it's personal preference, huh?
I don't think I want to do any of that.
You really don't. I mean, you really don't. And it's all going to be personal preference. I mean, if you want it to look a little bit nicer, really, you know, it's okay the way it is, okay? Don't reinvent the wheel.
Let's see how Eclipse allows you to precisely control paragraph behavior. Each of the paragraphs in your Eclipse user settings allows you advanced control. Many of these choices are fairly straightforward, such as the label for your paragraph, and the font that would be used for the Q symbol of the question, as opposed to the rest of the text in the paragraph. For any paragraph type, you can specify what kind of new paragraph should be inserted when you use a paragraphing stroke from your steno machine, or press Ctrl-P to add a continuation paragraph. Behaves as is not so straightforward. Of course, a question should behave as a question. But what does fixed mean? And how is it different from normal? If I click on the paragraph button at the edge of this line, you'll see that this is a fixed paragraph. Typically, such paragraphs behave as fixed. That means that Eclipse does not worry about capitalization or ending punctuation. I won't change the paragraph to behave as a question or an answer, but what if I changed it to have normal behavior? Then Eclipse would expect to do some extra processing of my text. As I'm spell checking, the beginning of this paragraph would be capitalized for me, and the spell checker would expect the paragraph to end in something other than a comma. But fixed paragraphs are not the only ones that need to behave as fixed. Here's a byline paragraph in the format that's used when an examination begins. This paragraph uses fixed behavior. Here's another byline paragraph that's used when questioning resumes after interruption, and it uses question behavior. Thus, this paragraph label appears in the same color as any other paragraph that has question behavior, and when I'm spell checking, Eclipse will notice if this paragraph is followed by another question paragraph.
If you want to change stuff, you can. I'm not stopping because you don't need to reinvent the wheel, okay? I don't do the bylines like that either, okay? So I'm going to go back and show you just a second of it.
Let's see how Eclipse allows you
towards the
to
end.
fixed behavior. Questioning resumes after interruption.
I don't do this. Some people do. The lady that I went and worked for didn't like it. So what you do is you do a separate by Mr. Jones again. And then the question is down here. That's just the way we did it. And that's the way it's going to be set up for you here when we do the exam, the final exam, okay? If you go to work for somebody else and they can change your settings whenever, you know, you go to work for them and that they want it like this, then help yourself, okay?
Let's see how Eclipse allows you to precisely control paragraph behavior. Each of the paragraphs in your Eclipse user settings allows you advanced control. Many of these choices are fairly straightforward, such as the label for your paragraph, and the font that would be used for the Q symbol of the question, as opposed to the rest of the text in the paragraph. For any paragraph type, you can specify what kind of new paragraph should be inserted when you use a paragraphing stroke from your is a fixed paragraph. Typically, such
Didn't we just go over that? They're saying all the same
It
stuff.
sounded the same.
Huh?
It sounded.
It was exactly the same.
Was it?
Yeah.
Well, how if you went down?
I don't know. Somebody was drinking during.
Let's see how Eclipse automatically inserts byline paragraphs to identify your questioners. One last note, in the Translate section of your user settings, you can ask Eclipse to insert missing bylines. This presumes that you inserted the byline at the start of an examination. Thereafter, when Q&A is interrupted by colloquy, if you forget to insert the byline, Eclipse will put it in for you. If you'd like Eclipse...
It's pretty cool. Check and see if yours is checked.
If you forget to insert the button,
This should be under Translate. It's not? I'd check it. Because once you have a speaker and then they break into colloquy and then you're like, ask a question again and you just, you forgot to put the speaker or whatever, you just start going into Q&A. It'll usually, I mean, it puts the byline in there, the missing byline.
byline, Eclipse will put it in for you. If you'd like Eclipse to also insert the byline when parentheticals interrupt Q&A, go to the Paragraphs section of your user settings, select Parenthetical, and use the Advanced button to set this paragraph to use parenthetical behavior.
Do you get it? It's not that big of a deal. So like if they say, well, we're in the middle of questioning, you know what, we're gonna go to lunch. Okay, lun, whereupon lunch recess was taken, come back. Resume questioning. You forgot, you just hit the cue, start going. If you do it that way, then I think it puts the byline in there. I don't do it, so I have, I think that's what it does. So I don't really do it. I'm using my speakers, and stuff like that. It's just better to always do it that way, but.
You said to check out the insert missing bylines?
Yeah.
The simplest paragraphs within Eclipse are called fixed. Here, let's look at their margins. Create a new Eclipse document, or press the Enter key when your cursor is at the end of a document, and a blank line will be added. Sometimes proceedings begin in such a rush that the reporter just starts writing, and the result might look like this. The text appears to spill off the page. Let's see why that is. User settings, paragraphs, fixed, and the right margin is set at 80. So the text wrapped right off the page. But that will be corrected as soon as I change this fixed paragraph to a question or some other paragraph with narrower margins. So should fixed paragraphs just not be set to have such wide margins? Not necessarily. Here, these blanks are being allowed to exceed the page boundaries, at least until they're filled in. So fixed paragraphs are perfect for the style of the case. For a paragraph to wrap your text on opening and closing pages, use one of the many available style paragraphs instead of the fixed paragraph.
So it might look like it's off the page. It won't. I mean, if you use the right form field, it'll adjust to whatever you need it to. If it needs to go to the next line, it'll go to the next line or whatever. Okay? Am I losing you?
Let's see how Eclipse lets you control the printing of time-stamped document. Timestamps come from real-time translation using any steno machine, as well as non-real-time writing on some steno writers with internal timestamping. When you're ready to print, just put a check in the box next to time codes, and Eclipse will use your user settings to print a time-stamped document. This gear icon opens the part of my user settings where I can set up time codes. Here's the button to select the time printing font, and where I indicated that I want to show hours, minutes, and seconds. You also need to indicate how often you want time codes to appear. You may want only a few time codes per page, or at the beginning of paragraphs, or on every line within paragraphs. Two of these time printing choices expect you to select specific paragraph types. So if I only want these paragraphs to show timestamps, I would go to the advanced settings for each of these paragraphs and put a check in the box next to time coded. And these settings could be copied to the master format so that they're remembered for all future documents.
Not really that important. One, we're not going to do it, but I mean, if you want to look at it, you can come up here and look at this one. This one has time coded stuff and it's on every line, whatever. So for depositions, you're going to need it. Okay, not that big of a deal. You can kind of get it and pass it around. If you turn those lights on, I'm going to smack it.
Oh my God! You said come look at it.
After class.
You did not say.
You're lucky we're done.
You didn't say that.
You are lucky we're done.
Oh yeah, I see the time.
Okay, guys, we kind of covered a lot of stuff today. Do y'all have any questions about the stuff we covered?
Nope.
Guys, unless you're very ill, I'd be here Wednesday. Wednesday's going to be an important day. We're going to do speakers, okay? So tell your buddies that aren't here today, the other 16, that, I mean, if you see them in class, that they might want to be here, okay? Any questions? Nope. All right.